Excuse me, Mr. DJ.
Hey, check this out. We got a great show coming your way.
From the ECSI Sports Studios, it's the Midday Market Report with Jeff Dawson.
Good afternoon, sports fans from all around the globe. I'm your host, Jeff Dawson, East Coast Sports Investors, and this is your Midday Market Report for Tuesday, December 6, 2022, our weekly trip to LA. This is my only chance to get out to that beautiful city of LA with our good friend and colleague, Ron, as we're going to break down the Final Four, the Selection Sunday, his power rankings, who he would have had in there just on power rankings, the NFL, Jimmy G, how that affects the 49ers stock, the rise of Dallas, as everyone now has a Philly-Dallas in a collision course. Don't tell TB12 that quick, as he does what he normally does when you give him a chance and finds a way to win late in the games. But without further ado, let's bring him in, the one and only Ron from Ron Ace Sports. Good afternoon, Ron.
Good afternoon. How are you?
I'm doing great. How are you today, sir?
Oh, wonderful. Got in a couple of sets of tennis, back to the football. Very good time of year, sunny day, no complaints.
Tennis. I grew up watching tennis. I love tennis. I play an occasional, but I'm not as much as I used to. Believe it or not, go way back to the glory days of McEnroe. My dad was a big Borg fan. My favorite player, you're going to laugh when I tell you this, people hated him because if you played against him, you had sawdust at the back line all the time. Ivan Lendl. As chalk and plain as and vanilla as it ever got. For some reason, I flocked to him.
I grew up liking players that nobody even knows who they are. Raul Ramirez, that name you'd have to Google him, but he was a great player. The Armitage brothers, when they lined up, the Bryan brothers out here in California, love watching them courtside at the tournaments out here. A lot of fun to see these guys. They're amazing athletes.
I know you're in LA. You like to flock to Vegas a lot. Were you an Agassi fan?
No, I kind of missed that. I was kind of neutral on him one way or another. Like Connors a little bit because he was left-handed, a little biased to left-handers since I'm a left-hander myself. I just like good tennis. I like Gael Monfils. He puts on a show right now. And like everybody else, a Roger Federer fan for his mastery of the shots.
Could talk for a while with tennis, but we will keep that to the other guys over there. So the Sunday selection committee before the kickoff of the NFL on Sunday, you know what? It was kind of set in my mind that the three undefeateds, it really didn't matter unless, TCU lost 50-0. Maybe they would have got bumped. Then the final straw on Friday night was basically handed to Ohio State when the Utes knock off USC there. I'm assuming your power rankings say different. Thoughts on the real Final Four and where your power rankings had the Final Four?
Yeah, I'm not surprised at what the committee did. Nobody was making a case for USC after they lost that game and having lost to Utah twice. But I would have made the case that USC would have been every bit as worthy as Ohio State, actually, because Ohio State's loss was a bad home loss and USC's loss was on neutral with a banged up quarterback, even though I thought I have Utah higher rating. I have them higher rated now, and I had them higher rated before the USC game. So I'm not surprised at the result. A lot of pressure on USC, of course. I could have gone either way on that one. Alabama, a little too far out of the mix with their losses, but Alabama would have been my third highest rated team. So I would have put them in the mix in terms of that. And my next highest rated team would probably have been Penn State. even above TCU. But TCU earned their way here. In fact, I think TCU's snub in 2013 or so played a part in this. Remember, they won something like 56-7, and they got bumped from 3rd to 5th at the end. Just kind of manipulation by the committee. That TCU team is actually, in my opinion, better than this TCU team. But I'm glad they're in. I'm glad we have new entries into the Final Four.
If I could ask you, with your power rankings, let's just say for poops and giggles, Alabama moved up. Would you have had for a spread, say, on a Michigan Alabama and a Georgia Alabama?
I'm looking at my numbers right now. I think I would have made Alabama about a 4-point dog to Georgia, but I could see them, because of the way Georgia's dominated lately and the way they took care of them last year, and they haven't missed a beat, that my power ratings of 4 would probably been a little low. I could have seen a 5.5, 6 there. Michigan would have been a little bit trickier. I would have had very, very close to pick 'em on that particular one, especially with Michigan, half of their run game being missing. And if you go one-dimensional against Georgia or Alabama, for that matter, I think it's a problem. I probably would have had Alabama favored.
This morning, I had Julian Edlow on from DraftKings, and then right after we had Dave Sharapan on. I asked both of them this question, and now I'm going to ask you this question. When I was trying to figure out the numbers in my head, I said to myself on the Georgia game, Ohio State, does the book want Ohio State money or does it want Georgia money? So meaning, do they open it at 7.5 and immediately get that Ohio State money? Or do they open it around 6, 6.5? And my assumption was anything below 7, 6.5, 6, they immediately would have got the Georgia money. I'm not seeing that. Surprised at that opening number of 6, 6.5.
I guess I'm going to be the contrarian here. The reason why I'm surprised at 6, 6.5 is because I don't have them rated that far apart.
Okay.
According to my numbers, it would be 3, 3.5. And so that's a high number for me. I understand that Georgia plays better defense. I have a lot of work to do on that game. I like to simulate some of these bowl games. I get into the numbers. I've got a lot of factors that I plug into my spreadsheet before I actually have a pick on games in the bowl season. But my first glance is that we're sleeping on Ohio State's defense because Jim Knowles has done a wonderful job as coordinator. They've got 4 weeks to overcome that loss to Michigan. Georgia's offense is really good and really balanced, but it's not necessarily dynamic. They really thrive on their defense. I think the battle for Ohio State is really, can their occasionally very high-powered offense penetrate this Georgia defense that hasn't been penetrated for 2 years?
It's going to be great. We do have a handful of weeks to start doing all our homework, seeing where these numbers go. I don't assume any of these 4 teams will have stars flocking to the portal /NFL. I guess Ohio State does have one guy a little banged up that he said, you know what, I'm not going to risk my stock in the draft and the wide receiver, and I will pass. The season's over officially before the bowl games. I have to ask, because I know you do so much work, so much homework, how did your college football futures work out?
The college football futures is kind of like a double-edged sword. It was not as good as 2021, which was 37-9, which is unrepeatable. This year, with an asterisk, it was 29-13. So it was pretty good. I got some breaks late in the season. However, if you take the asterisk away, it comes out to 26-13, I believe, because I had 3 plays voided because they didn't play enough games. It's the luck of the draw in terms of Virginia and Virginia Tech, things we talked about way, way back, you and I, about my early inclinations in the ACC. I faded both of those teams, but because they didn't play 12 games due to tragedy, the plays were voided. So my actual record will come out closer to 29 a little bit lower because I was voided a couple of wins in terms of the season win totals. But I'm pleased with them and really pleased with how the season played out in college.
And those are absolutely fascinating and amazing numbers, Ron. When you think about it, I know all the hard work, the blood, sweat, and tears that you put into it, and to come up with results like that is just phenomenal. Hats off. As you now get prepared for the bowl season, and then some time off to enjoy as you get ready, next spring to start the homework and the process over again. Do you look back at last year? What worked, what didn't work? I know you got 30 plus years of putting this together. Adding, subtracting, what did I do? Do you look at those 13 losses? What did I do wrong? Or was how do you add to the process?
Yeah, I look at everything. So that's a great question. I look at, I have the team sheets. I have 90 plus teams where I have team sheets. So I know exactly what date I bet, what odds I bet on each team. I keep cumulative records for each team going back dozens of years. So I have all that information. I'll know at the end of the year if I went 0-5 on a particular team. What did I miss? What did I do wrong? Why did I keep repeating the same mistake? That kind of thing. With the season wins, early on when you make a mistake. James Madison was a mistake to me. I and a couple of others, I think, followed my lead, and we thought this, the Sun Belt's a pretty good conference. James Madison is stepping up. They lost a couple of players. They lost, I think, one of their coaches, and they just amazed. And they beat me fair and square. That was one of my top plays. So I won't overanalyze that. I think I made a couple of mistakes. I typically make a couple of mistakes when I go over season win totals because my bread and butter is typically under. I'll make about 43 plays, about 30 of them, 30 to 32 plays are unders. So I'll go back and analyze. I look at the Power 5 conferences versus the non-Power 5 conferences, where I didn't take something where I should have, where I should have stepped up a bit when I didn't. Look back at my notes. But I'm self-screening, I think, throughout the year. I kind of know, why I did certain things. And you're right about another thing. The preparation for season wins starts almost immediately. As soon as new coaches are fired and new coaches are hired, I'm already forming an opinion for next year.
You talked about, 30, 32 out of 46 on the unders. Is that because most of these numbers are inflated because they know the general public, the degens, will always flock to the over?
Yeah, that's a great part of that. Absolutely. A lot of my overs tend to be in the non-Power 5 conferences because they're lightly regarded. All they need to do is spring one upset. They return. You get a lot of good information on number of returning starters. And as long as they didn't lose too many people in the transfer portal, it's actually the non-Power 5 conference teams that can be more stable than the Power 5 conference teams, especially the way the transfer portal is just blowing up as we speak. And that generally affects the Power 5 schools more in terms of the quarterback carousel is crazy. So some of that is, they do inflate the numbers. Some of that is it just takes one injury to ruin your over. If a key player gets hurt and you've got an over, you're in trouble, especially if it's at the quarterback position. And it's a brutal sport. And I'm always looking for value. You can always compare across different sports books in different jurisdictions, and you take the best priced under and you roll with it.
We, during the season, especially the start, we were kind of handpicking the coaches that were about to get fired or on the hot seat. We did very well with Georgia Tech. We did well with Colorado. I wasn't, assuming Wisconsin was going to make a move. But my question to you, and then we'll move on to the NFL, is in comes prime time. He hats off what he did for 3 years at Jackson State. Big name, high profile, not in the coaching ranks, but just his professional MLB, NFL, and what he brings to the table. Going to Colorado now, which Colorado and the Pac-12 should really take a bow here because they'll be losing UCLA and USC. So you got Lincoln Riley at I'm sorry, you won't have Lincoln Riley at USC.
Yeah.
So my question to you, under over wise, would Dion actually inflate an actual number? I have no idea what their under over was. They were, I mean, absolutely so dismal this year. Does a coach have any influence on an under over?
Absolutely. Urban Meyer had an influence in Jacksonville in the NFL last year. There's some coaches in the college ranks that have an influence when they go into a new job, and Dion will have an influence. We don't know. I don't know personally how great a coach he is, but he is already a tremendous recruiter. And that name recognition, the athletes that he brought into Jackson State were amazing. These are athletes that could have played at higher level schools and chose to go to him. And with USC and probably UCLA leaving, the window is open for Colorado to make an enormous leap due to the transfer portal and the enthusiasm around the program. Their number will probably be inflated. It's probably going to be a non-play for me if I could even venture a guess at this time. We're so far removed. We haven't finished this season. I don't want to venture a guess there. But I can tell you that this is a good hire from a perspective is that if it misses, it misses. Colorado has missed before. But if it hits, it might hit big.
I can't wait. I really can't. I'm excited. And again, it's something that the Pac 12 desperately needed when they're going to be losing two big time teams there. NFL, where to start? The Eagles keep rolling. What a performance, especially in the fourth quarter, Dallas puts on prime time there. San Francisco loses Jimmy G. In comes a Mr. Irrelevant. I don't know if they're going to go in on the Baker Mayfield sweepstakes. I said tongue-in-cheek, sarcastically to Dave Sharapan today, Matt Ryan was benched. You're done for the year. And let's see what we have with Ellinger. And then Jeff Saturday came onto the scene, and he brings him in trying to win a couple of games. We saw poor Matt and just take a beating in that fourth quarter. Shanahan worked with Matt Ryan in the Atlanta days. And I said to him, the conspiracy theory is call up Indy, say, you're not going to use him next year. Release him. At least I can bring him over. And he started laughing there. So let's start with the NFC. What happened on Sunday? Moving forward, your thoughts on San Fran now with Mr. Irrelevant? Dallas now, is that collision course coming? Or is someone like a Tom Brady who pulls a miracle last night? Where do you see the NFC right now?
I see it the NFC really, San Francisco took a hit. There's no other way to say it. Their defense is maybe number one in the NFL. They're going to rely on that much the same way. I equate it to when Drew Brees went down, not last year, but the year before when he still had some of that arm strength and he was still winning games. When he went down, the coach of New Orleans basically was Sean Payton, so he was innovative and he was going to do different things, but he relied on Dennis Allen, who's the coach now and a much better coordinator than he is a head coach, to shorten the games and to play defense. And I think that's what San Francisco is going to do. Unfortunately for San Francisco, the more tape you have on Brock Purdy, the more defenses and good defensive coordinators are going to be able to scheme against him. So down the road, there's going to be a point where Brock Purdy's performance falls off, in my opinion. And that leaves us with Dallas and Philly. I have Dallas higher power rated than Philadelphia, but I have Philadelphia the more complete team. And you always worry about Mike McCarthy as the coach of Dallas in terms of a big game situation. But Dallas has done nothing wrong. I mean, they're right there. Philly, Howie Roseman, GM of the year, in my opinion, the way he's put together the offensive and defensive roster, and home field is probably going to go through them. So that's tough. That gives them the edge over Dallas, but I still have Dallas slightly higher power rated.
all that talk about the NFC, and again, we don't talk about the Vikings, who's only got 2 losses, one behind Philly. And the funny thing is, open up 1-point favorites this Sunday in Detroit. Now 2.5-point underdogs in Detroit. Are you buying or selling there?
Maybe I'm one of the people there in the ranks that shouldn't be dismissing Minnesota. I'm guilty of that too. They're finding ways to win, and veteran teams find games, ways to win. And I think that was the difference in the Jet game last week, or we wouldn't be having this conversation. The Jets were probably the better team on the field that day, but they haven't learned how to win. They're a very young team. They're coached by a second-year coach. He came over from the defensive side. He's learning the offensive side. They had, some coaching turnover due to tragedy. So they're really going through the steps that it takes to learn how to win a game, and they left a win off the table or on the table last week. Many will keep doing what they're doing, and at some point, they'll run into a buzzsaw like they did against Dallas, and they'll get steamrolled. But in the meantime, they're going to play another young team in Detroit who's still, they think they're learning how to win because they've won 3 or 4 in a row and they just pummeled Jacksonville. So that'll be an interesting game because on paper, it probably does shape up to be an even game. I saw the line switch there. I still would have Minnie favored. So it's a line move that I don't think is warranted. But winning is contagious, especially for new coaches. And so they believe that even if they're out of a game, they have a chance in the fourth quarter, and that's what winning teams do.
AFC, statement made in my eyes. In comes Patrick Mahomes, 26-0 in his career in November and December. Perfect revenge spot to get the AFC championship game out of his way. And, 2.5-point favorites in Cincinnati. No Joe Mixon again. The return of Jamar Chase, and now Burrow 3-0 against Mahomes. He is the real deal. He just has a moxie. And I applaud Cincinnati for this because I would have seen so many coaches on that 3rd and 9 play. Hey, you know what we're going to do? We're going to run the ball here, and we're just going to buy 30 seconds, and then we're going to punt. And then Mahomes gets the ball with 1:02 left, and he marches down the field, and they would have beat him by 1. Bills now back to that number 1 seed. Got to go through Buffalo in January, which is not going to be an easy spot. And the fact if they do hold on to the 1 seed, they get that week off, which is just going to be an extra bonus to get healthy. What's your thoughts in the AFC? 3-horse race at this point. Lamar's hurt. I know Tua's banged up. The Patriots, forget about it. The Jets. What are you seeing in the AFC?
Well, you hit a lot of touch points there, and it's really a fascinating race right now. Cincinnati's roster is not perfect, but I think myself included, I kind of thought Kansas City would find a way to win last week, and they didn't. I kind of went against my power numbers. I mentioned on shows last week that I already had Cincinnati as number 5 power rated team in the NFL before last week's game. So I knew Cincinnati was becoming a better team, but their defense is better than a lot of people think. People don't realize how good that defense is. The offenses would be lagging behind, except for Joe Burrow reminds me of Andrew Luck. They didn't have enough. They couldn't protect Andrew Luck, and he had to retire early. Let's hope Joe Burrow doesn't have to retire early because, like you said, he is absolutely the real deal, and he wills this team to victory. Tough road to go through Buffalo. I think Buffalo withstood a lot of close losses. Now they have the mini bye, so they're going to get rested. I think we will see Buffalo hang on to the number 1 seed moving forward. And Kansas City and Cincinnati, if everything works out the way people think it will meet for a 4th time for the right to go to Buffalo in that game. I do believe, like you said, Baltimore has fallen back due to a variety of factors, not just Lamar. There's just something missing there. So you have the top 3 correctly. They're basically very close in power rating, all 3 of them. Buffalo a notch ahead of Cincinnati, and Cincinnati and KC being pretty close together on my tab, and all three are absolutely excellent teams.
Do you fear a Miami team? I know they got the speed on the outsides. They have a quarterback. Here's what I'm afraid of. Late December, early January, you get outside into the cold temperature, winds howling. Listen, I have no disrespect to Tua. He just doesn't have that arm strength. Get him in the tight quarters, slots, hit those guys in stride. That's where they're at their best. They have the two 49er running backs with Wilson and Mozart. Can they win a game, or is this a team that you think in the playoffs actually could put a run together?
I think you took the words right out of my mouth. The scheme that they use is so wonderful and so tight. Their player personnel, they've got everything in place. But if the weather changes on them, or they have to go to Buffalo and they can't run that scheme, then they're in trouble because not all the defensive pieces are there. And so eventually they'll wear down defensively. They won't be able to run their offense. If you get them in a clear, clean weather situation, I think they're going to be fine. Remember the San Francisco game, it was a tough one for them, not only because San Francisco has a great defense, but because a lot of the coaching came from San Francisco. They know each other so well, so they knew how to scheme against Tua. I think Tua can throw deep if he's given the opportunity to do that. I don't have problems with Tua's arm strength. I just think that they run the scheme that they do because that's where he excels. So they're dangerous, but I think defensively, there's too much Kansas City and too much Buffalo to believe that they could go unscathed in the playoffs.
My locals now 6-6. Mac blows up in the fourth quarter. You just sit there, watch the game on prime time, 3rd and 7s, and they're doing 6-yard outs to the sideline. Even if they caught the ball, they wouldn't have got the first down. I've been saying this for a while. I don't know if it's a conspiracy against Mac. I don't know if it's Matt Patricia conspiracy against Mac. I just know when I saw Zappy go out there, it was a different playbook. He's throwing it way farther down the field. They're stretching the field. They're going down the middle. They're going out west. They got Arizona, and they're right now 1.5, 2-point favorites in Arizona. They're going to stay in Arizona. They were supposed to be the primetime game the following Sunday in Vegas against the Raiders. Suddenly, we know how to win Vegas Raiders. Can the Patriots stay out west and win both games in Arizona and Vegas and come back home 8-6, still relevant, or is this next two games, thanks for playing and move on?
Can't answer that question. It's a tough one. I think they're capable of doing it because defensively, they are still one of the most fundamentally sound teams in the NFL. They're coached that way. They're schooled that way. They have veterans in key places on the roster. So they can force Murray into mistakes. If they can force Carr into some mistakes, sure, they can win those games. But we're watching a roster in transition, and we're watching, in my opinion, you guys are closer to it out on the East Coast than I am. I've had years of studying Belichick and so on. So my viewpoint is Belichick was late to the party with adding speed to the roster. Randy Moss was on the Manning cast last night and reminded me what speed can do for a team. But New England for years has kind of gone against that norm where they don't go for the stretch the field wide receiver. Even when Brady was there, they relied on power running game, flips to a great third down running back, whether it was Kevin Falk or any of the other names. And of course, the Gronk. I mean, he made everybody better with his blocking and everything else. And when they lost that and they see what's happening with the rules in the NFL favoring speed, I think Bill Belichick has been late to the party, but he drafted two very fast guys. One of the first times that he spent the draft on speed. And you saw a little snippet of that in that game last week when the guy, his first offensive touch was a touchdown. I think if Belichick stays with that norm and he goes and adds a little bit more speed to his roster and still has the fundamentally sound defense moving forward, that you're going to see better things. Unfortunately, I think you're going to see them in 2023 and 2022. There's still limitations on what the offense can do. If I'm a defensive coordinator, I'm not respecting the deep ball. So I'm going to crowd the line of scrimmage. I'm going to make these guys earn their yards. I'm going to try to rush Mac Jones. Matt Patricia isn't the answer. That's for sure. I think they have to get a little bit more creative with their play calling. I think they could throw more at Mac Jones. He has enough body of work. But overall, I think the roster just has to get a little bit faster.
Got a couple minutes left. I'll ask you first, and if no, I'll have a final question for you. Do you have a closing thought, a topic that you would like to take the stage and take us home today?
No, not really. Not necessarily in the NFL. I think we could talk when we get a little bit closer as to how those 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th playoff spots linger. We spent a lot of time talking about the top teams. The interesting races are going to be who's going to be the 7th seed in each division. And I think we'll get some clarity after this week. It might be a good topic for discussion moving forward. That 7th seed is wide open in both conferences.
All right. I want to ask as we close here, and it's more to the general public, with the transfer portal, with players now deciding, we were playing for a national championship. Now we're in the Alamo Bowl or whatever. I'm not going to risk getting injured. I'm going to just skip and I'm going to get myself ready for the draft. Can you give some help and some guidance to the novice how they should approach these bowl games? I mean, because once they're on TV, and I mean, the schedule's been released, everyone's going to run to the window, and it doesn't matter what if the Poinsettia Bowl, the Toilet Bowl, whatever, they're going to have some action on it. And you see numbers where this team was 3-point favorites, now they're 4-point dogs, and the person doesn't understand. Well, the quarterback's not playing, the running back's not playing. Oh, and the coach just left the building and he's going elsewhere.
Yeah, we've got a lot of interim coaches coming in. We've got the transfer portal, which is stupid to have it during this time. We have recruiting period, which is stupid to have it during this time. All that stuff. How do you handicap the bowls? I think I'll give you a tease. I'll give you some things. I think Chris and I will talk about that coming forward later this afternoon. I might even write a few things with Kyle Hunter about the bowls. So it's a topic that I might address 3 times, and you might need to have it addressed 30 times to get this right, because obviously there's already been some line moves, and part of it is anticipation. But for the novice bettor, we're talking about, we don't want to jump the gun. We want to be a little bit slower with this. So some pieces of advice I would have is you have to look at the transfer portal. You have to look and see how many people are not playing and who have decided to play in the bowl game. And you have to get the sites there. If you go through Twitter, you could probably find some stuff. Maybe I'll post a site or two that has that stuff as moving forward, because you have to look and see whether it's cluster. Are you losing all your wide receivers like the University of Florida did last year or the year before? Are you losing 3 offensive linemen because they don't feel like playing? Are you losing 2 defensive backs? Are you losing a quarterback where your backup quarterback has thrown 2 passes the whole year? So you have to look at who's the next man up and how many people are leaving a certain position. The other thing that I would say is don't stray from the stats that got a team there. If a team is a power running team and you think that they can own the line of scrimmage in a bowl game, then stick with that, because that tends to work in bowl games. 2 other pieces of advice that I would probably put out right now. Number 1 is beware of motivation. It's just such an overriding factor. If a team such as Oklahoma and some of these others they've been to bigger bowls in the past. If they're going to the Poland Weed Eater Bowl or the whatever bowl that they call these things now, and they're playing, on a Tuesday afternoon, it's not a big game for a big time program like in Oklahoma, Florida, and some of those other schools. So be careful about that in terms of what's the motivation. You can actually find out how fans travel to a game by searching for sites as to how many tickets were sold and how many tickets were sent back to the bowl committee. You know, how many teams travel. It's just crazy how that works. And finally, my final thing is to network. Listen to people, locals, listen to shows such as your show, find out, ask questions. Don't just sit there and try to figure it all out yourself. Network with professionals, and then don't be afraid to form your own opinion, but cover all your bases by making sure you get all the information you can.
Amazing advice. People, if you're not following Ron, you go over on Twitter at Ron A Sports. He's got a show following in 14 minutes with Vegas Chris. He has some amazing guests there. Knowledge, their years of experience dwarfs 98.9% of gambling Twitter, guys. Don't be fools. Listen. And it's funny. I'm going to close with this, Ron. You talked about all that information there, and in comes Nick Saban, who on Sunday says, well, TCU ought to basically get slapped on the wrist because that loss to Kansas State weighs a lot more than our two losses. Basically, poo-pooing Kansas State in their program. Guess who he's playing in a bowl game? Just happens to be Kansas State. So maybe Kansas State has some extra bulletin board material as they get ready for that bowl game.
Yeah, you got teams like Kansas State, Tulane, Kansas, for that matter. Some of these schools that are not used to either going to bowls or going to bigger bowls. What an exciting time for their fan base and so on. Still have to prove it on the field. You still have to do the matchup analysis, make sure that they have some edges. But motivation is certainly going to be in their favor.
And I'm a little disappointed. There was rumors that UConn was going to play Syracuse at Fenway Park, and I was all excited I would make the trip. So they ship UConn to Myrtle Beach to face Marshall, 10-point underdog. So I don't know if UConn will just rejoice to make a bowl game and their season's already been over, or if Jim will have them ready. So I'll be interested there. But thank you again, as always, Ron. Look forward to next Tuesday. Tell Vegas Chris we said hello back east, and have a hell of a show, Ron.
You too. Thanks for having me. See you again next week.
The one and only Mr. Ron, live from LA. I absolutely love our time with Ron. He gives us, a half hour, 45 minutes as he's getting ready to go on with Vegas Chris. Two giants in our lanes. These guys have so much knowledge. If you're not listening, jump on over there. It's notebook pen time when I listen to those guys. They have so much information for us, and we look forward to hearing from them every Tuesday at 3:30. I'm going to take a quick 15, 20-minute break. My fourth show of the day with Southside Riley. We're going to have the closing bell. We're going to try to get you ready for some college hoops, some NBA, short slate in the NBA, some NHL, and we're going to get everyone ready. ECSI VIPs, 1-0 to start the week yesterday. Team total Vegas, over 2.5. They got 2 goals like that. Got the third one the start of the second period. And our little pizza and beer, take them plus 161 to win the game outright. And the comical thing is I spoke to my good friend Scott at 4:30 yesterday via text, and he goes, oh, geez, you're going against the freight train who was 14-0 at the Garden. And that was the Bruins. I says, it's got, the numbers don't add up. I says, it's got 3-3 written all over it, probably overtime. Sure enough, 3-3 overtime, Vegas went to the shootout. So it is what it is. Thank you so much for watching again. Myself, Jeff Dawson at DC Sports Invest, the one and only Mr. Ron at Ron A Sports. We both thank you, and we'll see you soon.